Welcome to Moms on Mics. I'm Joanne.
I'm Cash.
And I'm Sophia.
This week we're going to continue with our West Memphis 3 coverage. This is our fourth last episode. So we're wrapping it up here for y'all. So this week we're going to talk about the fathers of the three boys. More specifically, one biological father, one stepfather, who became alternative suspects. So we're going to take a quick look at Todd Moore, and then we're going to take a much closer look at John Mark Byers. And then next week, we're going to look at the infamous Terry Hobbs. So Michael Moore's biological father is Todd Moore. He and his former wife, Dana, were known for being the most reserved and private of the victims' families, often avoiding the media spotlight. Unlike other parents in the case, whose professions were frequently mentioned in documentaries such as John Mark Byers and Terry Hobbs, Todd Moore's specific occupation at the time of the murders was not a focal point of the public investigation or the Paradise Lost films. According to Officer Birch, he spoke to him on May 10th, asking his whereabouts for Wednesday and Thursday, the 5th and 6th of April 93. It's noted in the transcript as April, but I would assume that it was a mistake and it's supposed to be May. Mr. Moore stated that he didn't return home from his truck run until 5 or 5:15 a.m. So I will note that I have also found it reported that he was at home with his wife the night of May 5th. Unfortunately, as I was unsuccessful in trying to find any confirmation of the trucking company he worked for at the time, so I can't verify exactly where he was. The police only asked his whereabouts on May 10th. They didn't ask him anything else, nor did they actually confirm the fact that he was en route by checking truck logs. There was a viable theory that whoever did this could have been a truck driver just passing through. The crime scene was in close proximity to the Blue Beacon truck wash. The woods were directly behind it. I would be interested to know if they ever looked into the trucks that stopped at Blue Beacon and looked into the drivers. But unfortunately, like most of this police investigation, there's no record. So, but I highly doubt they did anyway, due to resources and incompetency. So Christopher Byers' biological father is Ricky Murray. There is no prominent public record of his occupation at the time of the 1993 murders. Ricky Murray was interviewed by Detective Jim McReynolds on May the 24th, 1993, at the Clark County Police Department in Henryville, Indiana. His interview was actually pretty thorough compared to those lack thereof, of the other parents done by the West Memphis Police Department. Ricky had a solid alibi for May 5th and 6th, being that he was in Indiana at the time working with his father-in-law, who was a local pastor. John Mark Byers is the adoptive father of Christopher Byers, and we are going to look further into him in just a moment.
Stevie Branch's biological father is Stevie Branch Sr. Although he lived in West Memphis, hadn't lived with Pam and Stevie since Stevie was an infant. Following the murders, he remained active in the West Memphis area and the surrounding region to advocate for justice for his son. He was not interviewed by West Memphis police. His specific occupation at the time is not documented in mainstream records or documentaries. He was a presence during the trials. Terry Hobbs is the stepfather of Stevie Branch, and we are going to look further into him also. Now, let's take a closer look at John Mark Byers. He was quite the character in the first Paradise Lost documentary. He was boisterous and over the top, talking about how Damien, Jason, and Jesse should, quote, "I hope you all burn in hell and are tormented for eternity and a day. I couldn't ever put into words how much I hate you," end quote. He and Todd Moore shot pumpkins, saying they represented the West Memphis Three. They set fire in the woods, representing the West Memphis Three burning in hell. He sang in church. He quoted the Bible. He was in front of the camera a lot. If you have only seen the documentaries or were following along with the case in 1993, and you think of him as simply a grieving father whose son was just horrifically murdered by three devil-worshipping teenagers, one of which is smiling at him in court and even blows him a kiss, you can understand his rage. I would be wanting for hellfire justice if it was my child. You sympathize with his pain. But then you see the second documentary, and they talk about the human bite marks on Christopher Byers' body. Shortly after, when they are doing bite impressions of the suspects, then suddenly John Mark Byers has all his teeth removed, and something shifts. You start to look at John Mark Byers a little closer. You start to see his actions a little differently. You start to wonder, who is John Mark Byers? He's sometimes known as Mark Byers and was born on March 8, 1957 in Marked Tree, Arkansas. Mark is described as being 6'5" and approximately 238 pounds. Prior to marrying Melissa DeFur, Mark Byers was married to Sandra Byers. He had 2 biological children with Sandra, a boy and a girl. By 1989, Byers was married to Melissa and had a number of criminal charges against him relating to his treatment of his former wife and children. In 1988, Byers was charged with terroristic threatening and assault against his first wife, Sandra Byers. He allegedly threatened her life and used an electronic stunning device on her during a domestic dispute. Sandra Byers later alleged that John Mark used to beat her and their biological children in a manner that did not leave visible marks when they were dressed. In 1973, his own parents reportedly called the police, claiming he was threatening them with a butcher knife.
Jesus.
I could see that, though. Watching the documentaries, I could see that.
Right. I mean, he is a big guy, and he's this, like, this is going to sound so mean, but he's like this big, huge hillbilly, right? So he's like this overpowering presence. And at first, you totally get it. Like, even though he seems a little crazy, it's like, well, fuck yeah, these people just murdered his little boy. Like, of course, he's full of all this rage. But then, and then the more you dig into him, you're like, what the fuck? And then he's like standing up in church singing and like,
oh my God.
It's crazy. Did you ever watch the documentaries?
It's always those churchgoers.
Right? Yeah. I think especially when you get into like places like this where it's like the Bible Belt. Like there's like going to church and then there's going to church, you know? And I feel like sometimes it just kind of takes over and makes you a little nutty.
Yeah.
And not with like any bad intentions necessarily. I think it just kind of, it's a lot, right? Like it's almost, I think it's kind of like a cult. And
it is.
But at least there's like, like it's a cult with like good intentions.
Yeah.
That sometimes there's some people, like we can't blame it on religion because it's not the religion itself. It's the people that get crazy with it that go nuts.
My kids I sent them to, because their friend was going to a camp at this church. And so I'm like, oh, and they wanted my boys to go when they were younger too. So I'm like, all right, I'll sign them up. I'm cool with that. It's a cult. My kids had to, at their age, they were quite young, had to give themselves to God.
What?
Like
what does that mean?
I was like, what? And they made like this whole ceremony for it, that you are giving yourself to God and you are, and I was like, oh, like they ain't giving themselves to no one.
Right? They are my babies.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like it was pretty wild.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay.
I mean, my sons went to Catholic school all the way through. They graduated from Catholic school. And I will say, like, the school was good. Like, I didn't feel at any point, like, that they were pressured into, because they are not baptized. That wasn't my choice to make. That's up to them. And which I'll get a lot of hate for that. But whatever. I'm not a religious person. If I was religious, I would have done it. But I'm not. So I just happen to have been baptized Catholic by accident. But well, there's a whole story there I'll tell one day. But so they honestly went to the Catholic school because it was right next to our house.
Yeah.
And they were able to because I was accidentally baptized Catholic.
Right.
So, and if they were closer to the public school, they would have gone to the public school. Mm. There was no preference either way.
Whatever's closer.
Yeah, and they actually enjoyed some of the religion stuff. Like, I think that they're great stories, and I think the overall idea
Yeah.
is a nice idea. Like we treat others kindly. We, if you've got to worship some dude in the clouds, whatever. If that makes you treat people nicely, that's fine. You do you, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
I
when you
think,
become holier than thou and
yes.
like start pushing your views on other people and start insisting you give yourself over to God, like if we're
And
all
it's,
God's
yeah.
kids, doesn't he all aren't we already given over to him? Like, let's not get too let's not all drink the Kool-Aid, right? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I think if you take some of the ideas I think are fantastic, I don't think it's a religion's fault. I think it's the people that go batshit with the religion that make it
Yeah, and I think
nonsense.
sometimes it gets like spun into something
Yeah.
that it's not,
Yeah.
right? Like agencies.
Right?
You
Yeah.
know, they take something and they make something really big out of something that's really small
Yeah.
and sort of, yeah, right? Like they
Yeah.
spin it into their own theory, to
Exactly.
their own, yeah.
And when you've
And
got churches that have like millions of dollars in funds and they're not paying taxes because they're a religion,
yeah.
and they're making people give all their, like, you have to give a certain percent, like some, not all religions, but some, you have to give a certain percentage of your income to the church. Now we're getting culty,
Yeah.
really culty.
Well, they always ask for money, right? They hand
And
out
I
their
think
little
if, yeah,
basket.
and if you send out the basket and if people have some to give and they give a
Yeah.
little, that's fine. But when you're required, like I believe it's Jehovah's Witness, I had relatives that were in Jehovah's Witness and ooh, they all
Yeah.
batshit. And I think the idea that all these different groups have their own religion and their own
Yeah.
gods that that's fine. Why do we gotta fight about who's God? Like you're all
Yeah.
fighting about which dude in the clouds is actually rules over all of it. Like, come on, man. Like, then we get crazy.
Yeah.
Just worship who you want to worship, go where you want to go, believe in what you want to believe in. Don't get John Mark Byers of it all. That's all we're saying.
That is
That's
all.
our
Yeah.
advice to you.
Yeah. In 1995, Byers was found guilty of contributing to the delinquency of a minor. The incident involved him encouraging a teenager to fight another boy while Byers stood by with a rifle to ensure the fight was fair. Sandra reported concerns that she felt Byers was involved in the murders to Gary Gitchell, journalist Maria Leverett, in 2002. Prior to the murders of the three boys in West Memphis, Arkansas, John Mark Byers had criminal charges relating to the use of terroristic threats, grand theft, and drug use. One of the terroristic threats was, as we mentioned, the domestic dispute between Mark and his first wife, Sandra Byers. Byers was 30 years old when he accumulated this charge, and he was 35 when Judge David Burnett expunged it from his record. Despite the record having been expunged, documents detailing the charges were found at the Crittenden County Court by journalist Mara Leverett. It's important to note that Judge David Burnett is also the judge in the West Memphis 3 trials. In October of 1990, the owners of a jewelry store Byers previously worked for pressed charges against him for allegedly stealing $65,000 in jewelry. The police did not arrest Mark Byers, and so the owners took the complaint to the civil courts, filing a lawsuit against Byers and another couple. In 1991, Byers was ordered by the court to return the jewelry to the owners. In July of 1992, Byers was arrested for conspiring to sell cocaine and with carrying a dangerous weapon. He was booked in county jail in Memphis, Tennessee, and he was placed into the custody of the U.S. Marshals Service. It is interesting that Jesse Miskelly said in his confession that there was a briefcase that had cocaine and a gun in it. It's probably just a coincidence, but it's worth noting. Shortly before the murders in December of 1992, Byers again faced criminal charges regarding 11,000 in stolen Rolex watches. Detective Brian Ridge and Mike Allen were contacted by the United Parcel Service about the matter, reporting that the watches had been delivered to Byers and he was denying the shipment occurred. This matter had not been settled by the time the three boys were murdered in May of 1993. Byers eventually confessed to receiving the watches and selling them to a chiropractor in another town. Brent Davis made the recommendation that he not be prosecuted. Byers was asked to pay $7,400 in restitution, which would allow him to avoid criminal prosecution.
Yeah, Byers has sticky fingers.
I'm like 11,000 in Rolex watch. Like
That's like one
$11,000
watch.
doesn't even buy you half a watch.
Right? Well, I'm thinking in
Like,
like 1993 money, maybe you get a watch. I
I
don't
don't know.
know. Maybe they're like used Rolex,
Yeah.
right?
Maybe. I'm like,
Yeah.
that seems like an awfully low number to me.
Okay, on May 19th, 1993, Detective Ridge conducted an informal questioning of John Mark Byers. Ridge asks where Byers was when he first realized his son was missing, and Byers says, "When I realized Christopher wasn't at home, it would have been around 6:30." He says that when he first left the house at 5:30, he left Christopher under the carport with instructions to pick up paper, telling him that when he gets Ryan, they were all going to go eat supper. When he pulled up in the driveway, he didn't see him. He went in the house and Melissa was on the phone and he asked where Christopher was. She said that he was right outside. He said he had gone in and out a time or two to get a drink of water or a cookie. Byers said he walked back out and hollered across the fence to the neighbors because sometimes he goes next door and plays with the neighbors' kids. He didn't hear any answer. He then told his son Ryan to get on his skateboard and to go down and see if he's playing with the two little girls down the street. Ryan did that and they said they hadn't seen him. He said the three of them got into a car and started driving around their neighborhood. About 7:30 by the Dollar General store, there was a black police officer sitting in his car. So Byers pulled up beside him, rolled his window down and said, quote, "Sir, we can't find my son. He's missing." Then the officer said, "Well, how long have you been looking for him?" John Mark Byers says, quote, "I said about an hour or so." He looked at his watch. He said, "Well, why don't you give it till around 8 o'clock?" And he said, "If you don't find him, call the police station and let them know what he was wearing and all. And they'll send an officer by and you can give them a report. And then they'll put out over the mics what he's wearing and a patrolman riding around will maybe see him." Byers said they looked a little bit more around the neighborhood before they made it back home. When they got back home, he told Melissa he was going to call the sheriff's department because, quote, "they got a search and rescue squad," I said, "and we might need them." I said, I was starting to get, worried because my son was never gone off anywhere, for any amount of time. He's always stayed right there in the neighborhood, and it's now, dark's going to be coming on pretty soon. So I called the sheriff's department, and the guy answered. I told him my situation, who I was. It was a dispatcher, just whoever answered at the sheriff's department, which was a little bit before 8 o'clock. And he asked me where I lived, and I told him. He said, "Well, you need to call the West Memphis Police Department. Tell them your son's missing, and they'll call it." He basically told me what the police officer up there on the street told me, so I hung up. I called up here to the main number, and they said, "Okay, we'll send an officer right over."
Regina Meeks showed up just a few minutes later, took the report and put it out over the air about what he was wearing and where he was last seen. Meeks then said she was going to go driving around looking. As she was leaving, Dana Moore was knocking on the door. She said, "Have y'all found Christopher?" And Reese said, "No, we're looking for him." And she said, "Well, he's with Michael and Stevie." Byers said that was the first time he and his wife had heard anyone else was missing. Dana then said around 6:15, 6:20, she was walking the dog around the block and she saw Michael riding his bike. Stevie was on his bike and Christopher was on the back of the bike with Stevie. Dana said, "Just about halfway down the street here, it looks like Christopher's skateboard." Meeks then asked Dana how long she has been looking for her little boy and said for the last hour and a half, and that Stevie Branch's daddy has been looking for his son since about 4:30, 5 o'clock. She said she saw Christopher with them at 6:30. Byers then says that he and Ryan start going door to door just down the street asking all the kids if they've seen him. Down the street a little ways there was this, quote, black girl and this little black boy that live on the corner. I don't remember their names. A little boy and a girl that lived there that Christopher would play with. And the little boy and the little girl said, "Yeah, we saw Christopher and Stephen and Michael a little bit after 6:30. Our mama was bringing us home from the store Ree was coming down Goodwin, and Ree saw him going in the Robin Hood area. Well, then that concrete chute, you know, where the concrete part is that goes in down there, just right off of 14th, end quote. Byers and Ryan then go back to the house, and Dana is around her house looking. And then Terry Hobbs came by, and then they all converged down there looking in the woods. We started looking and looked in that area. It's now probably 8:30. It had got dark, and Terry said, well, he was going to spread out down, you know, towards where they were found. I don't know how far down that way he went, but he was going to look that way. And my son Ryan and I and Richie Masters, just somehow Richie Masters showed up to help look. And my son Ryan and I think Brett Smith. Richie Masters goes with Brett Smith's sister. So that's how they were kind of together. So we're looking in that area, kind of where the loop is. You know, there's in that open field, there's just kind of a circle around it out there. We were looking in that area of the bayou and all. Well, I had on a pair of shorts and a pair of flip-flops. So I run back to the house and change clothes and put me on some coveralls and boots that I had on probably for the next 2 or 3 days. And I went back out there and I made a path. I went all the way back to the back and walked up the gully to where it makes a real steep washdown. You can see where the water washes into the bayou. Well, I didn't have a flashlight or anything with me, and I thought, well, I'm going to go borrow a flashlight from Robert Fountain. I knew he just lived down the street from me. I knew I'd borrow a light from somebody. So as I came back out, I see a police car pull up, and it was Officer Moore, I believe. And he said, "Did you find anything?" I said, "No." I said, "But I don't have a light. Will you help me look?" He said, "Yeah, I'll help you look." So he got his light out and we walked back this trail. And then we cut back up this side, which runs into that ditch, kind of that's a steel ditch.
It's a little bizarre that so many people were in the woods, like in that area looking that night, and nobody came across anything. Like, it just seems so odd. Because the area is not that big, right? Like nobody heard anything, nobody saw anything. Just seems weird.
Byers said the two of them followed the ditch back to the bayou, where there was a grassy trail. They followed the trail around till they ended up where they started. Officer Moore looked around in the water with his light and said it didn't look like anyone had been down here. They continued to search the area, calling out all three of their names. They did eventually see 2 sets of bike tracks that looked to be heading in the direction down towards where they were eventually found. Byers said that he and Moore came out of the woods around 10:30, 10:45. At that point, Officer Moore told him he needed to go home and call up to the station and get a hold of the officer that took the report. Byers then said he called Officer Meeks at 11. Officer Meeks said he was telling her commander about it and he'll inform the next shift that's coming on and they'll be looking for them out on the streets. She explained that they have a curfew law and if they see them riding their bikes, they will pick them up. Byers said there were still people out in the woods looking. And so he left the house and went back down to start looking right after. He called the sheriff's department. The second time he said, "I've had 1 police officer out here helping me look for these boys." I said, "Now I called once and y'all told me what to do and I did that." I said, "Now I'm calling now and I want to know why the search and rescue squad won't come out here and help me look for my boy." And he said, "Well, they're probably at somebody's house and they've just forgot what time it is," he said. "Don't worry about it." I said, "I'm damn worried about it." I said, "My kid don't stay out." I said, "It's 11 o'clock at night. They're not at somebody's house." He said, "Well, I tell you what to do. If they don't come home tonight," he said, "you get a hold of Denver Reed." And I said, "Well, who's Denver Reed?" He said, "He's head of the search and rescue force." I said, "Okay." Byers said that he and Ryan got in the car and they drove around to Blue Beacon and went into the truck wash and told them there were 3 boys missing, that he wanted them to know because he wanted to go behind their property and holler and yell in the woods. And he wanted them to know why his car was back there. He pulled his little silver car around the back and Ryan was honking the horn while Byers was out hollering and yelling around the edge of the woods. A little skinny black guy and kind of a great big heavy black guy came walking out there and, said, "Well, what's going on?" Well, I told him, 3 boys are missing. And he said, "Well, if they come up here, we'll hold on to them for you." Well, we hollered and we yelled there for a while. Byers then walked into the bayou a little bit and hollered and yelled down toward the bayou and towards the hill until they went back home. When he got home, Stevie Branch's grandfather pulled up in Dana Moore's yard in his truck and he walked over. Byers said that he and Melissa, David Moore, Terry Hobbs, and his friend, and Stevie Branch's grandpa were talking about where they had all been looking, debating that if they had fallen in the bayou and drowned, where would the bikes be? Byers talked about how they felt helpless. They couldn't see how both bicycles could have run off in the bayou. He knew his son was a strong swimmer and thought the only way he could have drowned would have been trying to help one of the other kids that fell in. After a while, they went back to the woods to make another pass through. He said they didn't concentrate much on the area they were found in because they focused on the area that Ryan often rode his bike in. And the few times that Christopher had told him that he'd been down there, that was the area that he'd been in. He said he had heard them talk about pipes that you could cross the bayou with, but he hadn't seen it.
Yeah, more people in the woods, right? Like right around where they were found. Like, it's just so weird. Around 1:30 to 2 a.m., Sergeant Ball pulled up to the stoplight and asked what they were doing. Ball said, "We're patrolling around. We'll find them. Maybe they have found an abandoned house or a shed in somebody's backyard or a building and they've got up in that building, for cover." For cover from what? It's not storming. It's so fucking weird. Anyway, I've already read a couple more words. Because the mosquitoes. Oh my God. Okay. So they ducked for cover from the mosquitoes in these abandoned houses. This is fucking batshit crazy. I'm sorry. They all live in this area. They've lived in this area for ages. And then all of a sudden one day they're like, "Oh my God, all these mosquitoes. We got to duck for cover." Fuck off. How about the fact that it's 11 o'clock at night or now it's like 1 or 2 in the morning? They're 8-year-old boys. They didn't forget what time it was and it's 11 o'clock at night. Because they'd get tired. They'd get hungry. They would only make it out so long before they would just wander home on their own. Stupid, stupid policemen. Anyway, okay. It was warm that night and mosquitoes were bad. Byers said that he thought of an abandoned house down the street, so he went and looked in that. Then another friend of his, Tony Hudson, came over and Tony, Melissa, and Byers went to the service road where there used to be a mid-continent building that was blown down and was being rebuilt. They thought maybe that's not locked and they can get in there. There was a ladder in the back. Tony climbed up the ladder and got up on the roof to look. He went inside and looked around. There was a black van parked there on the lot. Byers said he checked all the doors, but it was locked. But he could see through the windows, and there were garbage bags and paper inside. There was also a trailer that they had tried to see if that trailer was unlocked and looked around that trailer. Tony brought Melissa and I home and said he was going to make a few more rounds around the neighborhood. That was around 2 or 3 a.m. As soon as it was daylight, Terry Hobbs, Dana, and maybe Todd knocked on the door. Byers put on his boots and they took off looking again. Ridge said they got several reports of gunshots and asked if they were out searching with somebody down there with a gun maybe, shooting up in the air and hollering at the kids. Byers said, "I never heard a gunshot fired," but he did say that Melissa said something about, "Did you hear that gunshot?" around 12 or 1 a.m. Byers said that it was a car on Wilson that backfired. He also said that Ryan had been out there looking with Brett and Richie and said, "Dad, I thought that I heard a rock or something hit the rocks." He said, quote, "I thought I heard something splash in the water," and he said it kind of sounded loud, end quote. Byers said that when they were looking in the morning, he came down 7th Street, and just as soon as he came across the bridge, he saw Todd, Terry, and Stevie Branch's biological father was right there. They said, "We've just walked up and down both sides of the bayou here, and we didn't see nothing." He said, "One of us was on this side, one of us was on that side, and we was trying to figure out where to look so we just wouldn't be on top of each other." Byers told them he was going to go down and going back around the area where he was last night. That's when he noticed the search and rescue. He had already met with Denver Reed at 8 o'clock. They had waited at the school. The parents and the group that were helping were there at the school. The boys didn't show up at 8 o'clock. He met Denver Reed around 6:30, 7 a.m., and he said to meet him at Ingram and Barton around 8:30 to 9, and they will, quote, get this search going, end quote. The search and rescue trucks pulled up, and the police department had pictures and descriptions that they were passing out to everybody. Byers said he made the comment to Denver Reed, when are y'all gonna go put a boat in the bayou? You know, if they've drowned. You know, let's get a boat in the bayou, end quote. Reed said that they would do that around 10 o'clock. There was a boat in the bayou coming their way. Byers, Terry Hobbs, and his father-in-law and the biological father of Stevie Branch went down and sat on the bank by the pipe. Byers walked up the hill and came down over the other side and saw a brown coat. He said he picked the brown coat up but didn't inspect it real close. He did put his hands in the pockets, and in one of the pockets was a disposable razor blade that was white, with a yellow cap on the end of it. Byers said that later he was told by Gary Gitchell that he'd been down there a month or two before and it had been there a long time. At that time, however, he brought the coat to Terry and his dad to show them the coat, but he left the coat on the bank that they had been sitting on when Melissa or Terry's wife called them, and they went back up there. Then they went back to the house and listened to the scanner until around lunchtime when Channel 3 or the media showed up.
Rich then asked Byers if he saw a young white male riding a bicycle with black, like an all-terrain bicycle with mud grip type tires, wearing a red shirt. Byers said he saw a guy that he had never seen in the neighborhood before, helping them search on one of the bigger bikes, kind of like a racing-sized bike. He said it seemed like it did have mud grip type tires on it. He was slender and had real short hair and kind of a thin face, but he couldn't remember if he had a red shirt on. He said, but I remember his face because I thought, boy, it's just a real thin face. And his hair was really short, almost military short. It was real short. But he said, I've been riding my bicycle down there looking for y'all. He said, I'm helping y'all look, you know. And I said, thank you. And we just kept on going. Rich then asked if you remembered anybody that had a flat on his bicycle. And he came back from across the pipe. Byers said, no, sir. He said he did hear something that sounded odd about a fellow who talked to Gitchell, a white guy, kind of chunky, heavy set, had kind of a shoulder-length wavy hair, and said when he had come home that night before around 6:30, he drove by the area and he had seen 4 people and 2 bicycles. He told Gitchell and he went and talked to the guy. During the day, the guy was on a red 3-wheeler, helping them look through the day. Rich then asked who would be Christopher's closest friend. Byers said Stevie, and this little boy named Aaron, before they moved to Marion. Rich also asked if Christopher had any girlfriends or anybody that he considered himself close to. Byers said he had told him and his mom he had a girlfriend named Amanda, which was Stevie's little sister. Rich then asked about any teenagers that he was attracted to or he wanted to hang around with, around 16, 17, 18-year-olds. Byers said there was one boy in particular that stuck out in his mind that he and Melissa had both felt was an odd individual. The only name he could remember was TJ. He lived around Holiday Circle or Wilson. Ryan had been over to his house several times. TJ was always wanted to play with Christopher as much or more than Ryan. He was 15 or 16. He was tall and skinny and still playing with Mutant Ninja Turtles. Christopher was 6 at the time. Byers said he remembered he painted a t-shirt with magic markers with Mutant Ninja Turtles on it for Christopher. He said, Melissa and I just thought it was odd that this bigger, older kid would want to play with our younger, actually more than he did Ryan. Ryan kind of hung around with him because at the time he was into Mutant Ninja Turtles too and skateboards, and this kid was skateboarding too, and Christopher kind of tagged along. But this boy seemed like he really enjoyed playing with Christopher, because a lot of the times he'd come over and knock on the door. Is Christopher home? I came to play with him. I told him one time, son, I think you're a little too big to be playing with Christopher. You need to play with boys your age. He sounds like he just might not mentally be there.
Yeah, that's the feel that I get to, right? Like if he's like autistic or something like that, and he likes playing with younger kids.
And because it wasn't talked about back then, he looked like
Yeah,
everybody.
exactly.
I agree. Ridge asked if he thought that Christopher trusted him because he played with him at different times. Byers said he would have if he had seen TJ. I don't think he would have been scared of him. Ridge asked if Christopher ever talked to him about going into Robin Hood Woods. Byers said he hadn't really mentioned much about going down there because he knew it was off limits because last summer Ryan and Brett Smith were down there on their bicycles playing and come running home all white in the face and excited and said, Dad, Dad, we saw a bum or a junkie or it was somebody and they were laying in the ditch down there and we thought maybe they were dead. And we hollered and kind of chucked some rocks over that way and they moved. And it was a bum down there. And I said, now, that's the reason why I don't want y'all down there. So I had told Ryan and Christopher on many, many occasions, don't go play in Robin Hood. Don't ride your bikes down there. There's nothing down there for you to go down there for. Stay away from there. Christopher had once told him that he was over by Mayfair Apartments where the pipe crosses, and there was a guy who had a car parked out there and that he saw a man dead under a car and I needed to come help him. Byers said I got him in the truck and he took me over there to show him, and there was a man under his car, but he was changing his oil.
That's such a kid thing. Eh? Oh my God, he's dead. No, I'm just changing my oil.
Ridge asked what he knew about the other parents. Byers said he did not know Terry and Pam at all and didn't really know the Moores across the street. They've been neighbors across the street since they moved in the house 4 years ago. They were just neighbors. They kind of had a little beef when we had some backyard barbecues and he quit inviting them because they would have a little too much to drink and they would get belligerent and loud and their good time would infringe on everybody else's good time. So I basically just quit inviting them because they partied. The Moores had also called the police on Byers 4 times. Well, there would be some people that would come over that would park in the street and they would have literally the width of their tire wheel in that little section of yard before you got to the sidewalk. Once they said the music was too loud, and then the time they complained about that, and the police came out, there wasn't even any music playing. Once they said another car was parked in the driveway, and that particular incident, I was given Dallas Brogdon his 50th birthday party, who was the sheriff of St. Francis County for 10, 15 years, so that was basically, we just really didn't have much to do with them. Byers said that Todd Moore made the comment when he had been told that his son was castrated, that he just had wished that they'd done it to all of them, and then come to find out it wasn't his son that was castrated. It was mine.
That's the weirdest fucking thing to say.
Yeah, it's
right?
Really sad though.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
But in all honesty, they just sound like they were kind of shitty neighbors. They were those neighbors that are annoying, like, they party a bit too loud, they park kind of annoyingly, they whatever, so they're kind of dicks. But we all have those neighbors sometimes. All right, so Ridge then asks Byers if he's Christopher's biological father. Byers says he is not. He doesn't know Christopher's biological father. He did go to the funeral, and he now lives in Indiana. His name is Ricky Lee Murray. Byers says that he gave his wife a very hard time. He was very mean to her. He said, quote, at one time he tried to put lighter fluid on her and set her on fire, or threatened to. Melissa believes that either him or his brother, Patrick, sexually assaulted her older son, Ryan, because one day Ryan told her about some things that Patrick did. That Patrick said they were going to play a game and that Ryan was just going to be the hot dog bun and he was going to be the hot dog. My wife feels like that Patrick assaulted Ryan when he was like 4. But this Ricky, he's got a record. He was arrested. He did 11 to 29 in Memphis for a hit and run. He was in the penal farm in Memphis. I think in 88. I don't really know much about him. I don't really know much about one of America's Most Wanted. They showed a picture of some clerk that got hit in the head by a bottle of whiskey and had talked about an eagle tattoo that he had and red hair and a beard and showed a composite of him. And my wife was so sure that that was her ex-husband that she called America's Most Wanted and told her, told them all that she knew about him. And at the time, she thought he was living in Washington State. That was about 2 years ago. Now, Ricky was not there when Christopher was born. Ricky left Melissa before the baby was born. They were legally married for 4 years, but they didn't live together. But about a year and a half of that 4 years, the last time that he laid eyes on Christopher was about 2.5 or 3. He bought him a bicycle and brought it to Christopher's grandparents in Memphis. And when he went by there and picked it up, he was there and saw him for just a minute. Ridge says, the night that Christopher came up missing, did anybody call Ricky? Byers said, not that night. After the boys were found, Melissa called one of Ricky's aunts. That was as far as I know, through the family relation. They tracked him down and told him about it. The first time we heard from him was Tuesday evening, before our funeral on Wednesday. Tuesday evening, there was a knock on the door and it was him. Ridge said that they needed to figure out where he was at the time of the murders. Byers said, he says he's been living in Indiana. Ridge asked if Christopher knew he existed, and Byers said he did. Ridge asked if just prior to the kids coming up missing, if they had any visitors out of the blue that hadn't visited before. Any salesmen in the area? Somebody that had just been visiting that you hadn't seen in a long time? He comes to visit, man or woman. Byers said he couldn't think of anybody. Ridge then asked if there was anybody in his family that had a history of abuse, and Byers said, quote, no, sir, end quote.
The penal farm is just a prison farm.
Oh, like a farm?
No, it's a large correctional facility where convicted criminals perform manual labor, usually in agriculture or animal care.
Aw, well, that's kind of cool.
Ridge then asks if he can think of anything we need to be asking. Can you think of a direction we ought to be going in? Or is there someone you think we ought to talk to? Or somebody you've wondered about? Or had someone that Christopher said he was afraid of or leery of? Byers responds with, quote, who's all going to hear that tape? I mean, not like the media, or I'm not trying to keep something from you. I just don't know how to bring this out. Sudbury says it wouldn't have to do with Anthony Griffin, would it? Byers says Lee Anthony Griffin. Lee Anthony Griffin? I know Lee Griffin in Memphis. That's what I'm thinking about. Ridge asks, what makes you think we ought to be looking at him? Do you feel like you might be vindictive towards him? I'm sure you know why, or you wouldn't have his name. Byers says, yeah, I know all about him. Ridge then says, okay, I don't know. I know I have heard that he had been arrested in Memphis for homosexual activity. Ridge shows Byers a picture of Lee Griffin and asks Byers if he recognizes him. Byers said, this isn't that TJ I was telling you about. That's not him, and that's definitely not Lee Griffin. Sudbury asks if he saw this person trying to help locate the boys, or if he sticks out that you know of him. Byers said he kind of does look familiar to me. I want to say he kind of looks like somebody that I ran into not too long ago down at Flash Market. They're at Ingram. Coming in, going out. He was coming in or going out. But it seemed like I bumped in. It wasn't that I bumped into him, but he was right there because I had a thing of milk and my sack broke and the milk fell down and just it was in a thing. And I looked up and he was like standing there and it seemed like he does look familiar. And I think I saw him in Flash Market and it seemed like it was a couple of weeks ago. Rich asked if Christopher ever told you of somebody he may have been scared of. Byers said, a lot you'll see kids come in lots of times. There's a guy down the street that's just weird. Boy, don't go around his house, 'cause he's going to run you off. Something like that. Rich then asked, and another thing, is there anybody that you normally see around that you haven't seen since this happened? This is another one of those questions I just want you to think about. Maybe call me. If nothing just obvious comes up right now, call me later. Byers said, I see what you're asking. Someone that used to come around a lot and now since this happened, they're just like gone. You couldn't find them. And the only other thing about Lee Griffin, I had just because of a situation that happened, and I'm sure you're aware of, that I worked with the city here. I just felt like maybe he would be vindictive. I don't know if he has at any or not.
Sudbury asked, is there anybody else like Lee that you dealt with in that same manner? That maybe you made one other attempt or something like that? Byers said, well, I helped him on a meth lab out in Marion, but I never got directly involved in. But I think he's in jail right now. His name, do you want his name? Scotty Redden. I think he's from West Memphis and his girlfriend or something lives down there off Macaulay. I think, or no, his wife's sister lives on Macaulay, drives a little maroon Chevrolet pickup truck, and they were just bound and determined. Scotty's sister-in-law, let me get it right. Every time she'd see me or Melissa, she'd flip us off, cuss us, you son of a bitches, we're going to get you, we know you busted Scotty, things like that. Sudbury asks, is there something that you think you need to tell us about that maybe we just haven't touched on? Something that's in the back of your mind that we just haven't give you an opportunity to say yet? Byers says he had really wondered about Lee and Scotty Redden and a little bit about Daniel Hatchett. Sudbury asks, who's Daniel? Byers explains he was partnered with him in a pawn shop for a while. After he was closing his jewelry business due to his brain tumor, Daniel suggested they go into business together in a pawn shop. A friend of Byers and a gold buyer from Houston, Matt Elbon, had told Byers that his partner was bogus. The next day, Matt told Byers that he had hired Mike Morgan to investigate him. Mike Morgan found out that he didn't live where he said he did and wasn't a lawyer, as he had claimed, and the House of Representatives tags on his car were fake. He found out where he lived, and it was a little old dump. 5 or 6 months later, Byers and Melissa were driving by there, and there was garbage out on the street, and he'd been evicted from his house. When Byers questioned him about it, he told him, oh, I'm in the federal witness protection program, and that's why I've got those tags on my car. That's why I had to tell you I was a lawyer. I'm really protected by the federal government, and they pay me a salary. Byers had Jan Thomas draw up a partnership disclosure agreement where he bought me out. Byers said if Daniel saw any of them out in the yard, Daniel would cuss us, flip us off, or cuss, you little son of a bitches, cussing at my kids and stuff, and I despised him. To tell you the truth, I really can't stand the guy. To be honest with you, he conned me, took me for a ride and a half, and then ended up with my safe, my alarm system, my showcases. He bought them for me for a lot less than I had in them, but I haven't seen him drive around the neighborhood lately at all. But those would be the only 3 people that I could think of that might be vindictive, towards me or that maybe had a bone to pick with me. Well, that's a story and a half.
Right?
I'm like, holy.
Yeah. Like, I don't know. If you got kids, stay out of the crime scene, man. Like, just don't associate with shady people.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you got little kids. What the fuck are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
Ridge then asked if there was any kind of conflict of any kind, of argument between you and your wife, you and the boys, anything like that. Byers said there was no conflict between him and Melissa. He got home at 3:10 and Christopher wasn't there. They had to leave and take Ryan to court at 4, so he left the door unlocked for Christopher. When they got back, they noticed that Christopher had been back to the house because I thought I'd left the door unlocked and I hadn't left. I didn't leave the door unlocked. It was locked. But the carport window right there, he knew he could push it up because it doesn't lock good. So he had gotten one of the lawn chairs, pushed it over in front of the window, and he had tried to push the window in. But we got a microwave cart right inside the window there, and there's flowers and stuff sitting on it, and he realized that he couldn't get the window up enough by himself to crawl in the window. So he took off. Well, this is like 5:20 because I just got home with my wife. I thought, well, I'm going to get Ryan. Well, I backed out of the driveway, headed up 14th towards Broadway, and I had got maybe 4 or 5 houses, down to 14th, headed to Broadway, maybe from here to the curb. This is the street, and that's the curb right about here. Out of in the street is Christopher laying on his stomach doing his hands like this on his skateboard, heading to Broadway. I pulled up behind him in the car. He didn't even hear me. I honked the horn. He turned around and it was Daddy. And took back a million times I've took back a million times for spanking him. When I took him back home, but I took him back home, I said, well, what were you doing on your skateboard in the middle of the street laying down? Well, I was just skating, Dad. I said, well, son, you got spanking coming. Yes, sir. So there at our bar, he held onto the bar and I gave him 2 or 3 licks. And I said, now I'm going to get Ryan. His mom was sitting right there in the kitchen. I said, now I'm going to get Ryan. You clean up the paper under the carport here. That's the rest of your punishment. As soon as I get back with Ryan, we're going to eat supper. And I have, if I could have took whipping him back, I'd done it a million times. But I was just trying to keep him safe. I was just trying to, keep from something like this happening. I just a million times, son, if you'd just have minded me this one time, if you'd just minded me this one time. Sudbury asked if he was taking any medication. Byers had a brain tumor, and he's been having blackouts and breakouts in sweats, bad migraine, headaches, tunnel vision. So he's taking Tegretol, which is an anti-seizure medicine. He said he'd taken 10 milligram of Valium at about 2 o'clock. Ridge then asked if he believed in white or black magic. Byers said he believes there are demons and devils and angels, and that some people can be demonically possessed.
Ridge asked if he knew anybody around that is really into that. Byers said, no, sir. I don't know anybody. If I were to see somebody that I thought, I'd run as far as I could. The only person in town here that I've seen that seemed real weird to me, there's another guy that will verify this, up at Walgreens. The older black guy that sweeps up in there. And he works around McDonald's and all. Him and I, since I had my mom's store, talked, We're just friends. And there's an older guy. Seems like he drove. Seemed like I saw him getting in his car one day. And it seemed like it was a dark brown and white. Maybe an 80 model Mercury Marquise. Kind of an older guy. I'm going to say late 40s, early 50s. Maybe 6 foot. And I'm going to say weighed maybe 200 pounds. And he had a cross tattooed right there with little marks out in front of it. An older white guy right there, and the older black guy that I was telling you about. And I don't know how it was about. I met this guy coming down the aisle, and I think he was sweeping, and he met him. And then the black guy and I turned around and started talking. We said, did you see that guy? Tattoo on his head and all? And we commented about, man, he looked weird. Didn't he? So right now, that's the only really weird person that I can think of. Ridge asked if he had ever been physically or mentally abused, and Byers said no. He then asked if he knew any friends of these boys that may have played regularly down there in the Robin Hood. Byers said periodically just almost every kid in that neighborhood has seemed like it's hard for their parents to keep them out of there. I mean, all them trails that you all see out there were made by a lot of the kids going in and out through there for years. I've talked to guys that are now like 25, said I was playing out there when I was 10 years old. Rich then asked, how do you feel about being here today? You think we're doing a good job? You think we're wasting time? What do you think? Byers said, just from what I have read in my 36 years of life and what I've seen on TV in my 36 years, as you gentlemen have seen probably many more terrible crimes than I have. I've only seen it on TV, but I have seen on TV and of course the news media, where at times things like this, like the war boy a few years ago, I never would have thought that what 15, 16-year-old boy did that, but he did. So I know at that times it is possible that some family members could have done this. Ridge asks, do you feel good about us covering all the bases? Byers says yes. Why would you ask if they're doing a good job?
Right? And honestly, no, sir, you are not doing a good job. But maybe to see if he, like, what his response is, right? Like, if he's like, oh, yeah, I think you're doing a great job. Yeah, you're nailing it. Could be suspicious, seen as they're not getting anywhere in their investigation. And I think the correct answer would have been, no, you've done a shitty job because you don't have the people that did this to my kid or whatever, right? Like, yeah.
Rich then says, okay, well, what I want to say right now and what I'm going to say is that I may have information. This information suggests strongly that you have something to do with the disappearance of the boys and ultimately of the murder. Okay, what is your response to that? Byers replies, my first response is, I can't fathom where you would get that. And it makes me so mad inside that I just kind of got to hold myself here in this chair. Ridge then says, okay, who of all the people you know might make that kind of suggestion? Byers replies, I wouldn't have the slightest idea. If I did, it would make me want to hit them. You know, it would make me mad to think that someone maybe has said something like that about me. It makes me mad. Rich says, let's go a little further with it then. If we find the person that did this, and you know there's always a good chance of that, it's going to happen. If this person is found to be mentally sick, just crazy, do you think he's going to be rehabilitated ever to go back on the street again? Do you think he should be given a second chance? Byers replies, no, because from what John Fogelman told me, that these individuals, he couldn't see how they could plead insanity because they tried to cover up their crime. And he promised me in Gary Gitchell's office with the other fathers in there that it didn't matter what age they were, that he was going to prosecute them and as an adult, and he would try for the death penalty. And then in the paper, it said in the paper that they could not get off on saying they were mentally sick because they tried to cover it up. And in a way, I mean, I just can't fathom. It's almost more than I can believe. You know of what you just said to me. Ridge then said, for the sake of this interview, it was to get a response. We want to know what your response is. And I'm not saying anybody made that accusation. Okay, but I had to evoke that response from you. I had to know what your response was. You understand that? Do you understand? Byers said, I probably will. I don't right now. It hurts. Rich said, it hurts me to have to ask it, as much as I know it hurts you when I saw your response. We're going to talk to the other fathers too, and we're going to try to get the same response. We're going to ask them the same questions, and I think when you think about everything we've talked about, you'll understand why we're doing this. It's not to hurt you, it's to get the truth, but I do want to ask you. Byers interrupts and says, just tell me one thing, man to man. You tell man to man. I don't care on the record or off the record. You know, I didn't have anything to do with the murder of my son and those other two boys. Ridge said, man to man, I know that.
Yeah, it's tough. You know, like when you see his responses, it seems pretty genuine to me, right?
Yeah.
It would be really hard to fake that kind of response, I think. Okay, so during this interrogation, the interviewing officer asks Byers what medication he is on, to which he answers Xanax and Zoranol, which he stated were antidepressants. When he was asked whether he had any other medication, he told police no. Yet he had stated at other times that he was taking Tegretol, which is the brand name of the drug carbamazepine. This is the same substance which was found in a non-therapeutic amounts in Christopher's blood after his death. Christopher had also been taking Tegretol according to his medical records, but Byers had stated that Christopher had not taken his medication on that day that he went missing. Although there were many items of evidence that could have pointed to John Mark Byers as the murderer of the three boys, he was never considered by police as a suspect, nor was he even thoroughly investigated. It is interesting to note that John Mark Byers was on very friendly terms with the investigating officers and was a drug informant for the WMPD at the time of the murders. Could bias in favor of Byers and against Eccles on the part of the investigating police have blinded them to any evidence which might have led the investigation away from Damien and towards Byers? Many people believe that John Mark Byers was guilty and was treated with significant hostility by his community and the general public. Shortly after the 1994 trials, Byers and his wife moved to Cherokee Village to escape this intense publicity and community backlash in West Memphis. However, a longer trail of violence followed them. In April of 1994, shortly after the trials, the Byers moved to Cherokee Village, a quiet community of about 4,000 close to the Missouri border. Shortly after arriving at their new home, the couple, according to police, disturbed the peace in the quiet community. Police from Cherokee Village, the neighboring town of Hardy, and Sharp County Sheriff's Office all have been called to investigate incidents involving Mark or Melissa Byers, or both. Donna and John Kingsbury live next door to the Byers and have sought a restraining order against their new neighbors, alleging that Mark Byers whipped their 5-year-old son with the metal end of a swatter, that shots have been fired at their house, and that Melissa Byers threatened them, saying, "We'll put you in the hole you can't get out of. And I lost my Christopher. Maybe you need to see what it's like to lose a child." In the summer of 1994, the home of Cherokee Village woman was burglarized with an estimated $20,000 worth of furnishings taken. Mark and Melissa Byers were charged with the residential burglary and theft. Later that year, at the home of Brenda Atwood, the woman whose house the Byers are charged with burglarizing, the sheriffs investigated an explosion and subsequent fire that destroyed a 1976 Dodge Travelmate motorhome that was parked in Atwood's driveway. July 11th, in 1994, Byers drove into Hardy, accompanied by a teenage boy that was not a relative. Another boy passed by the truck, and he and the boy who was riding with Byers exchanged words. The boy on foot then proceeded to what's known as the Old Hardy Bridge over the Spring River, where he joined a group of 4 other friends ranging from 15 to 17 years old. As Byers drove across the Old Hardy Bridge, more words were reportedly exchanged between his passenger and the other boy. Byers drove on, but then turned around and returned to the bridge, where witnesses said he asked the boy from Hardy if he, quote, had a problem, end quote, and suggested that he, quote, take it over in the shade and settle it like a man, end quote.
The group of 7 people, 6 juveniles and Byers, then moved to a spot by the river known as Pecan Grove. Somehow, a pocket knife belonging to Byers got into Byers' passenger's hand. Byers supposedly told the juvenile, "Don't open the knife." The 2 boys who had exchanged words, reportedly over a girl, now found themselves in a vicious fight, with Byers' companion using the folded knife in his hand as what the boys called a fist pack. When someone in the group noticed the knife and hollered out, "He has a knife," Byers' companion threw the knife aside. At that point, the boys watching the fight moved in and tried to stop it. But as they did, Byers told them to stand back. He said, "Stay where you are. It's not between you. It's between them." The boys did back off, in part because Byers was holding a gun at his side. Byers said, "At no time did I intimidate or threaten any of those kids." Finally, the boy with Byers asked his opponent, "Have you had enough?" He had. He had been beaten badly enough that he lost consciousness and later had to be hospitalized. Byer and his companion got back in their car and drove alongside the victim of the fight, who was still lying on the ground. Some of the boys in the group said that Byers told them, "You better not mess with me. You don't know who I am." Byers denies saying that. No one disputes, however, that the boys with him then reached out the window with a can of Mountain Dew and poured it over the prone boy's head, saying, "This will wake him up." A highway department employee working nearby heard the altercation and ran over to intervene. He met Byers, who was leaving on his way, and reported that Byers told him, "Some smart-ass kid got his ass kicked. He got what he deserved." As a result of the incident, the boy whom Byers had driven to the altercation and who had used Byers' knife ended up being charged with second-degree battery, a Class D felony. He had had no prior criminal record.
Byers himself was charged with contributing to the delinquency of a minor, a Class A misdemeanor. Then tragedy struck again. Melissa Byers died 3 years after Christopher was murdered. Melissa and John Mark Byers were having problems in their marriage in 1996. Melissa left her husband to live with her parents. She and her son Ryan returned to her home with John Mark Byers 2 to 3 weeks before she passed away. Norm Metz, the neighbor living at 73 Skyline, confirmed that Ryan came back to live with his mother and father 2 weeks before March 29th. Melissa was worried about an upcoming trial involving a robbery of $20,000 worth of goods and property. Metz said that prior to her death, she seemed to be irritated and had a bad attitude. On March 29, 1996, at 3:30 p.m., Ryan and his girlfriend Amanda were dropped off from school at the Byers residence. Ryan stated he knocked on the door to his parents' room and both answered him. He went to watch television with Amanda, and then he said they went to his bedroom to listen to music. John Mark called to Ryan twice. The second time he requested a towel. Ryan brought the towel into the master bedroom where he observed his mother cough and throw up. Ryan asked if his mother was all right, and Byers told him he did not know. Ryan and Byers then began CPR on Melissa. He said the neighbor, Norm Metz, came into the bedroom to help his stepfather. At this point, Ryan said he couldn't take it anymore, and so he and Amanda left, drove around, got gas, and bought a soda. They continued to drive around until evening when they went to Ryan's grandfather's house. Norm Metz gave a statement to investigator Stan Witt, stating that he received a phone call from John Mark Byers at about 5 p.m. When Byers informed him of Melissa's condition, Metz asked why he had not called an ambulance. Byers asked Metz to come over to the house. Metz observed Ryan and his girlfriend on the couch, nude. He went to the bedroom and saw Melissa on the floor, completely naked. Metz checked for a pulse and told Byers to perform CPR. Melissa gurgled up some fluid, and Metz called for an ambulance. Metz had to go back to his own home to make the call because he did not have his glasses. He said that when he returned, Ryan and John Mark were attempting to put pants on Melissa. He asked John Mark if Melissa was dead. He said that John Mark said no, and Ryan had a funny, eerie look on his face. He said he went and got a towel and told Mark to keep doing CPR, and also told Ryan to take his girlfriend home and get back there. At approximately 5:30 p.m., an ambulance responded to Cherokee Village where Melissa was reported as being unresponsive. Norm Metz stated that when the EMTs showed up, Ryan kept mumbling something and he did not seem coherent. He advised that when he left, he almost flipped his car over. He left so fast, spinning gravel. The autopsy revealed abnormalities like an enlarged heart and a narrowed artery, which can lead to sudden death but are not always fatal. Traces of several substances were found in her system. However, the medical examiner concluded that the levels were not high enough to be lethal. Due to John Mark Byers' erratic behavior and their history of domestic issues, some initially suspected foul play, such as smothering. However, the medical examiner found no physical signs of a struggle or trauma consistent with such an act. Some community members and friends believe the immense stress following the brutal murder of her son, Christopher, contributed to her declining health and eventual death. She died at age 40 on March 29th, 1996. Despite an extensive autopsy and toxicology investigation that lasted 6 months, medical examiners could not find a specific anatomical cause for her death.
John Mark Byers is a reasonable suspect. We've already established he has a history of domestic violence and many other criminal activities. He admitted to hitting Christopher with a belt the day of the murders. Christopher was the only one with scars that occurred before the murders, according to the medical examiner. After hearing all this, you can understand why many feel John Mark Byers is a viable suspect. But could he have done it? I personally do not believe so. He did not have time. He was with other people all night, and although this can be debated at times, the disputes are often from years later. I think John Mark Byers had a troubled life, often due to his own poor decisions. He was abusive at times, which I think were probably due to substance abuse, but I don't think he murdered these boys. I don't see any motive or opportunity. He was the red herring in the case. There really isn't much evidence that could have linked John Mark Byers to the murders. There was the presence of another human hair on the victim's clothing. It was a black Caucasian hair, which was shown to be microscopically similar to both John Mark Byers and Damien Eccles. Unfortunately, nothing more specific was determined. John Mark Byers was never considered by police to be a suspect, nor was he ever thoroughly investigated. It is interesting to note that John Mark Byers was on very friendly terms with the investigating officers and was a drug informant for the WMPD, like we had mentioned earlier, at the times of the murders, and this could bias in favor of Byers. The only time he could have done this would have been after the last phone call with Sergeant Ball, so around 11:30 p.m. But if that were true, where were the boys from their last sighting of 6 to 6:30 p.m.? If they were in the woods, they could have been seen by one of the many searchers in the area. And as we know, the boys were most likely killed prior to 9:30 p.m. due to the lack of mosquito activity on their bodies. John Mark Byers had bipolar disorder, and his behavior was actually pretty typical of a person with bipolar, especially one who lost a child. The intensity they give off and experience things is extreme. He's also a performer. He knows an emotion reaction is expected, and he overcompensates due to the poor regulation of his emotions. He also had a documented history of substance abuse and criminal drug activities. Melissa also had her own struggles with addiction, and quite frankly, both of their behavior in the Paradise Lost documentaries reflect that. During the filming of the Paradise Lost documentaries, Byers was taking several medications for a brain tumor, which some observers believe contributed to his erratic and seemingly drugged up behavior. I also find it hard to believe that if John Mark Byers was guilty, that he would have ever switched his belief in the guilt of the West Memphis Three. And he did. He first publicly declared he believed the West Memphis Three were innocent in late 2007. Byers began meeting with the defense attorneys of the West Memphis Three to review the evidence himself. He appeared on Good Morning America stating, quote, "I hated you for years. I believed with all my heart you killed my son, and I'm sorry for that," end quote. By the time of their release in 2011, Byers had become one of their most vocal advocates, even attending their release from prison. So while John Mark Byers was weird, eccentric, and not a great guy, he didn't murder these boys. In 2012, Byers released a book titled Untying the Knot, which detailed his personal journey from believing in their guilt to becoming a supporter. He dedicated the book to all three victims, Christopher Byers, Stevie Branch, and Michael Moore. John Mark Byers was killed in a single-vehicle car crash in Millington, Tennessee. According to official reports, his vehicle left the road on Chambers Road and struck a tree. He was transported to a hospital in Memphis, where he later succumbed to his injuries. Accusing John Mark Byers with no evidence to back that claim is exactly what happened to the West Memphis Three. John Mark Byers did not do this.
Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, he was crazy as a loon. 100%. Which is probably not the nicest way of me to put that, but he was nutty. I mean, he was a character for sure. In all the documentaries and all the TV interviews, everything, he was out there. He was very boisterous, and he just became the other suspect, right?
Yeah.
I think he had a tragic life. unfortunately, and a lot of it he caused himself.
Well, bipolar is so hard to deal with too, right? Like one minute you're happy-go-lucky, but then the next minute you're frustrated as hell because
Yeah,
being happy-go-lucky. So it's hard.
yeah. And then having a brain tumor on top of bipolar, and yeah, this poor family, man. So Ryan is basically the only one left, right? Because Christopher, then Melissa, then John Mark.
That's so sad. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So that, ladies and gentlemen, was John Mark Byers. And next week, Terry Hobbs,
Your favorite.
my favorites. This guy.
Your favorite, not in a good way, though.
Yeah, no, he's my favorite one to hate. He just like I've listened to him talk. He's very punchable. You just want to like, oh, he just, and I don't know if he does it intentionally or if he's just that's how he talks. He's kind of a dick. And I read his book, and I don't recommend it unless you like reading books that make you hate somebody. And I don't like that word. I don't like to use the word hate like with people because I feel like it's such a strong word. Like I'll call him a cunt. I'll say I like they're a fucker, like whatever. But to say you actually hate somebody it's a lot. I think he might be the only person that I can legit. Well, actually, no, there is a few others, but he's one of my top that I'm like, I just can't with that guy. And I want to have empathy for him because he did lose his stepson, but he gives you every reason not to. So yeah, so look forward to that next week. So that's it for Moms on Mics this week.
Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Moms on Mics Podcast, on TikTok at Moms on Mics, and join our Facebook group, Moms on Mics.
If anyone has any topics you would like us to cover, or if you have any questions or suggestions, you can email us at momsonmics@gmail.com or submit through our website, momsonmics.com.
We would also appreciate it if you could rate and review us on whatever platform you're listening on. It really helps the podcast move up on their charts so it gets more exposure. I hope you join us again next week. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.